In a decision that echoed from Washington to Shanghai, the world paused to witness a pivotal moment in modern history. The Supreme Court, in a move that would reverberate across continents, struck down the tariffs that had defined an era of economic tension and political division. The justices, after months of deliberation and intense public scrutiny, declared Donald Trump's sweeping tariffs unconstitutional, marking a dramatic end to one of the most controversial chapters in recent trade policy. Their ruling was clear and unequivocal. The tariffs represented an overreach of executive authority, violating the foundational principles enshrined in the Constitution. Delivered on a crisp February morning, the decision sent shockwaves through financial markets, with traders scrambling to assess the implications. Politicians on both sides of the aisle were caught off guard as the news rippled through the halls of power. For years, these tariffs had been a lightning rod for debate, sparking protests, disrupting global supply chains, and leaving factories idle. Businesses large and small had struggled to adapt, while consumers felt the pinch of rising prices. Now, with a single pronouncement, the court dismantled a cornerstone of Trump's economic agenda. The decision not only reversed a key policy, but also reasserted the boundaries of presidential power, reminding the nation that no leader stands above the law. The justices emphasized that their ruling was not a judgment on the merits of tariffs themselves, but a defense of the rule of law and the vital separation of powers that underpins American democracy. The tariffs, originally enacted under the pretext of a national emergency, had become a symbol of unchecked executive authority. Critics argued that such sweeping actions, taken without congressional approval, threatened the delicate balance of government. By striking them down, the court restored Congress's constitutional role in shaping trade and economic policy. Lawmakers, many of whom had felt sidelined, now found themselves thrust back into the center of the debate. The aftermath was immediate and chaotic. Lawyers across the country began preparing refund claims for businesses that had paid billions in tariffs. Legal teams worked late into the night, combing through documents and filing paperwork at a frantic pace. Around the globe, foreign governments welcomed the decision, signaling a willingness to ease trade tensions and open new channels for negotiation. Diplomats met behind closed doors, eager to reset relations and explore fresh opportunities for cooperation. In Washington, lawmakers scrambled to adjust to the new reality. Urgent meetings were called, legislative aides updated policy briefs, and politicians fielded calls from anxious constituents and business leaders. For supporters of the tariffs, the ruling was a bitter defeat. Many had believed the measures were necessary to protect American industries and jobs, and now faced an uncertain future. For opponents, however, it was a resounding victory, a triumph for constitutional order, free trade, and the checks and balances that define the American system. The court's message was unmistakable. No president, regardless of popularity or power, is above the constitutional framework. The decision reaffirmed the enduring strength of American institutions. As the world watched, America's balance of power was not just tested, but redefined, reminding all that in the United States, the rule of law prevails above all else. The legal battle that unfolded was about far more than just tariffs. It was a test of the limits of presidential authority in the United States. At the heart of the case was the question, could President Trump lawfully invoke emergency powers to reshape trade policy? Or was he overstepping the boundaries set by the Constitution? The administration's argument relied heavily on the 1977 International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEPA, a law originally designed to give presidents flexibility in times of genuine crisis, especially those involving national security or foreign threats. Trump's legal team insisted that global trade imbalances and perceived threats to American industries justified taking swift, unilateral action. They claimed that the president needed broad authority to respond to rapidly changing international conditions, especially in the face of what they described as unfair practices by foreign governments. But critics pushed back, arguing that the IEPA was never intended as a tool for economic protectionism or to bypass Congress on major policy shifts. Legal scholars and lawmakers warned that allowing such a broad interpretation would set a dangerous precedent, effectively letting any president sidestep the legislative branch whenever they saw fit. The Constitution is clear. The power to regulate foreign commerce and impose tariffs rests with Congress, not the president. This separation of powers is a cornerstone of American democracy, designed to prevent any one branch from accumulating too much control. During oral arguments, justices from across the ideological spectrum pressed the administration's lawyers, probing the limits of executive power. They questioned whether the president could simply declare an emergency for almost any reason, and what that would mean for the future of congressional authority. The justices expressed real concern that, if unchecked, any president could use emergency declarations as a loophole to bypass Congress, undermining the careful balance of powers the framers intended. In the end, the Supreme Court's ruling was decisive. The majority found that the government's case failed to meet the high threshold set by the IEEPA. The threat cited by the administration, they concluded, did not rise to the level of a true emergency, as envisioned by the law. The decision drew a clear and unmistakable line. Emergency powers cannot be used as a pretext for sweeping economic changes that properly belong to Congress. The ruling reaffirmed the vital role of the legislative branch in shaping the nation's economic policy. Ultimately, the case became a powerful affirmation of constitutional checks and balances, a reminder that, even in turbulent times, the rule of law and the separation of powers remain at the core of American government. As the case unfolded, public opinion turned sharply against the president's position. Across the country, Americans from all walks of life began to voice their concerns, not just about the specific tariffs in question, but about the broader implications for democracy and the balance of power. Conversations erupted in living rooms, workplaces, and online forums, as citizens questioned whether any one leader should have the unchecked authority to make sweeping economic decisions that could impact millions. A Marquette Law School poll found 63% of Americans wanted the Supreme Court to restrict a president's authority to impose tariffs unilaterally. This was not just a partisan issue. People from both major parties, as well as independents, expressed a desire for more oversight and accountability. The poll's results reflected a growing skepticism about the concentration of power in the executive branch, especially when it came to decisions that could disrupt the economy or international relations. Most Americans believed tariffs hurt the economy, and only 30% thought they helped. Many pointed to rising prices, job losses in certain industries, and uncertainty for small businesses as evidence that unilateral trade actions could have unintended consequences. The economic anxiety was palpable, with families and business owners alike feeling the ripple effects of policy decisions made far from their communities. The poll revealed a broad, bipartisan desire to rein in executive power and maintain checks and balances. Americans of all backgrounds seem to agree that the nation's founders intended for no single branch of government to dominate the others. This moment became a rare point of unity, as people from different political perspectives found common ground in their support for constitutional safeguards. Americans were wary of a single leader making major economic decisions without oversight. Many feared that such unchecked power could set a dangerous precedent, undermining the democratic process and threatening the stability of the nation's institutions. The public's unease was reflected in editorials, town hall meetings, and conversations across the country. The same poll showed overwhelming support for keeping the Federal Reserve independent, reinforcing the public's appetite for institutional integrity. Americans recognized the importance of having neutral, expert-driven bodies making critical decisions about the economy, rather than leaving such matters to political whims. This sentiment underscored a broader trust in the nation's system of checks and balances. Many believed the court was reluctant to rule against Trump, making its decisive action even more significant. The public watched closely, aware of the high stakes and the potential for the judiciary to either reinforce or challenge the status quo. When the decision finally came, it was seen as a pivotal moment for the rule of law. By striking down the tariffs, the court pushed back against perceptions of political bias and reasserted its independence. The ruling sent a clear message that no individual, not even the president, is above the law. It also reassured many Americans that the nation's institutions could still function as intended, even in times of deep political division. The ruling resonated with a public eager for constitutional order. For many, it was a moment of relief and renewed faith in the system. A reminder that despite challenges, the principles of democracy and accountability remain at the heart of American governance. The path to the Supreme Court's decision was marked by bold presidential pronouncements and escalating legal challenges. Trump's vow to use all executive powers on tariffs galvanized opponents and set the stage for a constitutional showdown. The case reached the court in fall 2025, with oral arguments revealing deep skepticism about the administration's use of emergency powers. Despite apparent consensus, the court's silence in the following months fueled speculation and public anticipation. Polls showed Americans growing weary of trade disputes and concerned about congressional authority eroding. Finally, in February 2026, the court issued its comprehensive ruling, ending a multi-year saga. The timing reflected the complexity and gravity of the issues at stake. The justices aimed to craft a lasting legal framework for future disputes over presidential power. The Supreme Court's reasoning was rooted in the separation of powers. The majority opinion focused on the legality of the process, not the merits of tariffs. The court found the IEEPA was meant for genuine crises, not long-term economic issues, and reaffirmed Congress's authority over trade. The justices provided clear guidance for lower courts, empowering them to act swiftly in future cases. The decision signaled that future attempts to use emergency powers for economic policy would face tough judicial scrutiny. Ultimately, the ruling clarified that executive ambition cannot override constitutional safeguards. The ruling is a major political and practical setback for Trump. He must now explain to supporters why his signature policy was struck down as unlawful. The administration faces the complex task of retracting tariffs and notifying affected countries. For American businesses, the end of tariffs means lower costs and eased supply chains. For protected industries, it brings new uncertainty. Globally, the decision paves the way for de-escalation of trade wars and renewed stability. The U.S. government must process billions in refund claims, a daunting logistical and financial challenge. The case highlights the risks of implementing major policies on shaky legal ground. Future presidents will face swift legal challenges if they try similar moves. The era of using emergency powers for protectionist trade policy is over. This Supreme Court ruling redraws the boundaries of presidential authority. For decades, executive power has expanded, but this decision pushes back, restoring Congress's role in economic policy. Presidents can no longer unilaterally control trade through emergency declarations. The ruling hands power back to Congress, ensuring major policy decisions require debate and consensus. It sends a message: the separation of powers is a constitutional requirement, not a suggestion. The decision will make future presidents more cautious in invoking emergency powers. The court reinforced that the power to regulate commerce belongs to Congress. The ruling strengthens American democracy by keeping economic power in the hands of the people's representatives. With the Supreme Court's decision, the U.S. enters a new era in trade policy. The unwinding of tariffs will require complex negotiations and a shift toward diplomacy over confrontation. Legal battles aren't over. Protectionists may seek new ways to impose trade barriers, but the court's principles will guide future cases. The responsibility for trade policy now returns to Congress, opening the door for more open debate and stakeholder input. The ruling promises a more stable, predictable approach to trade, even if it's slower. By striking down the tariffs, the court reaffirmed the rule of law as the foundation of economic and political stability. The next chapter will be one of adjustment, but with constitutional order restored.